pracharine nirvishesha sunyavadi paschachade satarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Prabhupada had been scheduled to go to Bangkok, but because the importance of the work in Bombay, he decided to stay on and to send Brahmananda in his stead. I was delighted. We could get more of Prabhupada's association guidance and support. And he was confirming the great importance of the Juhu project. The day after writing Governor Reddy, Prabhupada wrote to the people of Bangkok, Thailand, I'm sorry I'm not able to come, but I must remain here in Bombay for some pressing matters. I'm sending my secretary, His Holiness Brahmananda Maharaj, who will represent me. The Krishna Consciousness Mission is not sectarian. We want to do what the United Nations has failed to do. The human form of body is an opportunity for solving all the problems of life. Through evolution, we come to the human form for solving this problem. The real problem is the repetition of birth, death, disease, and old age. But there is another status of life where there is no birth, death, disease, and old age. The Krishna consciousness movement is the means for promoting the human being to that status. This is a great science. And it is elaborately explained in the Bhagavad Gita. So our mission is to give the benediction to all humanity. Let us cooperate together on this basis so that it will be more effective United Nations. We shall be united on the basis of the prime need of human society, spiritual life. Under Prabhupada's guidance, we were pursuing the NOC and the permission to build on all fronts. Prabhupada himself was dealing with Governor Reddy to get through to the governor of Maharashtra. Bhagavan and I were dealing with the police commissioner. Mr. Sethi was dealing with his friend Mr. Pai, who, like Mahotre, was also a municipal councillor to try to get the plans approved by the municipality. Eventually, Mr. Sethi told Prabhupada that if we wanted the plans passed, we would have to pay something. That's India. We all knew that the officers and politicians in India were corrupt and that practically nothing moved without a bribe, but we had never indulged in such practices and had never proposed doing so to Prabhupada. Although the municipal commissioner was a relatively small officer compared with the ministers, Mr. Sethi told us his income from bribes was 20,000 rupees a day. Mr. Sethi explained that initially only the officers were taking bribes, but after some time, even the clerks and peons working in the office had started to demand them. They wouldn't take your file off the shelf unless you paid them something. They wouldn't process your file from one table to another unless you paid them. When news of this reached the officers, they had been indignant and summoned the clerks and peons and told them, "What is this nonsense that you're demanding money for doing little service?" But the clerks and peons had said, "You are taking bribe for your work, so why shouldn't we take ours? Shouldn't we take bribe for ours?" The officers hadn't been able to reply, and thus had been forced to condone the lower level corruption. Mr. Sethi explained that a percentage of every bribe was paid higher and higher up, and that at the top at least in theory, the Prime Minister herself received a portion of every bribe paid. The ward officer was accountable to the commissioner. The commissioner was accountable to the urban affairs minister. The urban affairs minister was accountable to the chief minister. Chief minister was accountable to the prime minister. So any bribe paid somewhere along the line would have to be distributed upwards, with each person in the hierarchy receiving his or her share so that the operation could work smoothly. When our application for the NOC was again refused, Prabhupada and Mr. Sethi concluded that we should apply for municipal permission without the temple, because only the temple required the NOC. And Mr. Sethi felt confident that if we didn't have to get the NOC from the police, he could get the permission for the rest of the project, the residential quarters and preaching areas, from the municipal commissioner. So Prabhupada agreed that we give Mr. Sethi 5,000 rupees. And as Mr. Sethi pursued the permit, he kept Prabhupada informed on a regular basis. We are definitely getting it in 2 weeks, he would report. We are definitely getting it in 1 week. We are definitely getting it in 3 days. And then something would come up and he would say, oh, we're getting it in another 2 weeks. Eventually, he told Prabhupada to need another 5,000 rupees. Oh, India. Prabhupada called for a meeting with Bhagavan and me to discuss the whole affair. He asked whether we thought Mr. Sethi had swallowed or kept the 5,000 rupees, or whether he had given it to Mr. Pai and Pai had kept it, whether we should give Mr. Sethi the additional funds. He discussed the matter with us all evening, shortly after 8 until midnight, almost midnight, asking for our opinions. When we presented the view that we shouldn't give the money to Mr. Sethi, Prabhupada said why we should, and we became convinced. Then, when we were convinced that we should give the money, Prabhupada would present arguments why we shouldn't. And again, we became convinced. There were so many factors to consider whether Mr. Sethi would give the money or the full amount to the commissioner, whether the commissioner, having taken the money, would give the permission, and whether he might take the amount and then keep asking for more. So many complexities. In this way, Prabhupada kept going back and forth. I started to doze off, but Bhagavan continued to listen attentively and respond. Finally, Prabhupada declared, we will not do this. And it was concluded they would not give Mr. Sethi the money. Then he stood up from behind his desk and walked out of the room, leaving Bhagavan and me stunned and exhausted. We looked at each other, offered our obeisances to Prabhupada's Venkadasana, and retired for the night. The next morning, Bhagavan and I were a little apprehensive about how Prabhupada would present his decision to Mr. Sethi and how Mr. Sethi would take it. And we waited anxiously for Mr. Sethi to arrive in Prabhupada's room. As usual, he came around 10 and sat on the floor before Prabhupada. We all knew that he had come for the additional 5,000 rupees. So, what do you think? Prabhupada asked him. Should we do it? Yes, Mr. Sethi replied, because otherwise we're not getting the permission. All right. Prabhupada said without hesitation, just the opposite of the previous night conclusion, and he arranged the money for Mr. Sethi. Shui. Bhagavan and I were amazed and somewhat bewildered by what had transpired, but then we considered what lessons we might have been meant to learn from the incident. One was that Prabhupada was training us to evaluate a situation from every angle. He had always said that intelligence means to see the same thing from different angles of vision. We also considered that he was teaching us not to be naive or ingenuous with regards to even our best friends, such as Mr. Sethi, but to always be cautious and be careful. Further, we considered that by agreeing to give Mr. Sethi the money, Prabhupada was showing that even though We should be alert to the possibility of cheating. We should give a good friend the benefit of the doubt. We should not offend or hurt him. And then we considered that the Juhu project was so important that even if the money was lost, it was worth taking the chance because somehow, if we could get the permission, it would be wonderful for Srila Prabhupada's preaching and service to Sri Sri Radha Rasabihari. Ultimately, Srila Prabhupada is teaching us to surrender. It is said if the Guru tells the disciple the rope is a snake, the disciple will respond, yes, it's a snake. And that if the Guru then says, no, it's a rope, the disciple will agree. This is a basic principle of obedience to the spiritual master. And Prabhupada was showing us that, like Lord Chaitanya, he could take any side of an argument and defeat any other. Break. While working on getting the permission to build from the municipal corporation, Mr. Sethi was also helping us build the additional floors on the existing buildings. But it appeared that some of the work and materials were below standard. Some of the wood was full of holes and defects. So Prabhupada directed us to oversee the work and materials more carefully. He had engaged Mr. Sethi to supervise the construction and put his trust in him, but it appeared that none of the work was being done that well, albeit some was passable. When the rotten wood came to the site, Prabhupada became very disturbed and chastised us. He quoted a Bengali saying that a goldsmith, when fashioning some gold his mother gave him to make into a ring, thinks, should I use all the gold for the ring or put some in my pocket? This type of cheating was so much a part of the goldsmith's business, Prabhupada said, that even if his own mother gave him gold to make an ornament, he would think, should I cheat and keep some for myself? Similarly, the construction business was such that someone in it would automatically think, should I make a little extra money for myself? You could not engage in the business, procuring materials and paying bribes and getting permits without some cheating, no matter whose money it was. On January 19, Mr. Sethi said that he would get the permission to build the project minus the temple in 2 or 4 days, and on the third day he got it. Prabhupada was jubilant and called for another cornerstone laying ceremony. He had already held the groundbreaking and cornerstone laying ceremony when we first moved on to the land March 72, and another ceremony on Ram Navami 74. But he wanted one now to signify the beginning of the main construction. He devised a festival wishing to invite all our life members and friends in Bombay. Quote, immediately you make a ceremony tomorrow, he directed, and then the next day I will leave. He informed whatever members we could, especially the intimate ones like Kartikeya Mahadevya and Mr. Vashisht, a retired school principal living in Juhu, whom Prabhupada had initiated as Dikshit Das. Interesting name, huh? And who spoke at the ceremony. Some of the neighbors, and of course, Mr. Sethi. With his own hand, Prabhupada applied the mortar around the cornerstone and fixed it in the bricks. Then he spoke about his mission. Quote, I'll not take much of your time, but I shall try to convince you what is the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement. The purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement is to save the human society from becoming animals, cows and asses. He means it too. People have established, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, an animal and asuric civilization. The beginning of asuric civilization is pravrittim cha nivrittim cha jana navantur asura. In the asuric, demonic civilization, people do not know which way they have to guide themselves for attaining the perfection of life, pravritti and nivritti, what is favorable and unfavorable, pravritti cha, pravrittim, nivrittim cha, jana navatur asara. Na shocham napi cha chara. There's no cleanliness, nor good behavior, no na satyam tesho vidyate, and there's no truth in their life. This is the beginning of demoniac civilization. Satyam, there is no truthfulness. And the first class life means the Brahmana life. Satyam, Shocham. The beginning is Satyam. The Asuric life is no Satyam, no truth. And the first class life in human society, the Brahmins, is Satyam. And Tapak Shocham, Shantir Arjava Evacha Jnana Vijnanamastikam, our Krishna consciousness movement is to create a class of ideal first class men with Satyam, Shocham, Topo, Sama, Dhamma, Titiksha. This is godly civilization, and this godly civilization can be given to the whole world by India. That is India's special privilege. And we selected this Bombay city. Bombay is the best, most advanced city in India. The people are very nice, religiously inclined, opulent, and they take up better things very nicely. Therefore, I wanted to start the Center Bombay for spreading this Krishna consciousness movement, although there have been many impediments in my endeavor. Still, ultimately, it is Krishna's business. It will come successful. So today, the foundation and cornerstone establishment was done 2 years before, but there were many, many impediments from the Asuric Jana people. Now, some way or other, we've got a little relief from such impediments. So we are putting this cornerstone this auspicious day, and I'm very glad that you've joined us. So the mission is very, very authorized, and it comprehends a large jurisdiction of activities. Therefore, my request is that the inhabitants of Bombay, especially those who are members, kindly take active part to make this institution successful in Bombay. So many ladies and gentlemen are present here. Whatever we are doing is not whimsical or mental concoction. It is authorized and just to the standard of Bhagavad Gita. So, make this center successful. You, ladies and gentlemen of Bombay, we've got a very, very nice place. We are building so that you can come and stay here, at least on the weekend. Those who are retired, elderly ladies and gentlemen, can come here and stay. We will have sufficient place. But try to organize these principles of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. That will be the gift of India. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu desired that anyone who has taken his birth in India as a human being, famous, Bharata Bhumite Haila Manusha Janmajar, Janma Sata Sartha Kari Kara Upakar. Because you have got the standard, how to make life successful, here is Bhagavad Gita. Try to understand it, make your life successful, and then broadcast this message all over the world. That is Paropakar, working for the benefit of others. India's people are meant for Paropakar, not for exploiting others. That is not our mission, but actually that is being done. Everyone goes to the outsider. Everyone goes out of India to exploit. Now, for the first time, India is giving something to the outsiders, this spiritual knowledge. And the proof you can see. We are giving, we are not taking. We do not beg, give me wheat, give me money, give me this, give me that. No, we are giving something substantial, and they are feeling obliged. Otherwise, why these young men and girls are after this Krishna consciousness movement? They are feeling something, that they're getting something tangible. So it has got potency, very good potency. They are not feeling like Americans or Canadians or Australians, and we are not feeling as Indians. On the spiritual platform, we are one. So, this is a great culture, Bhagavad Gita as it is. Those responsible ladies and gentlemen present here make this center very successful and come here and study Bhagavad Gita as it is without any foolish interpretation. I say foolish again and again because interpretation is not at all required. Everything is clear from the very beginning. So try to understand Bhagavad Gita as it is, make your life successful, and spread this message all over the world. You will be happy, and the world will be happy. I'm a very old man now, 80 years old. My life is finished. But I want some responsible Indians and combined with people from other countries. Other countries are giving good cooperation. Otherwise, it would not have been possible for me to spread in such a short time, only 7 or 8 years, to preach this cult all over the world. So I require the cooperation of the Indians, especially the educated young men. Come forward, stay with us, study Bhagavad Gita. We haven't got to manufacture anything, and what we can manufacture, we are all imperfect. Whatever there is, let us study it and practically apply in life and spread the message all over the world. So today is a very auspicious day. With great difficulty, we've got now sanctioned. Now, please cooperate with this attempt as far as possible with your pranaya, aritaya, diya, vacha. 4 things: by your life, your words, by your money. Pranaya, aritaya, diya, vacha. Shreya acharanam sada. This is the mistake, and this is the mission of human life. Whatever you have got, it is not that because I'm a poor man, I cannot help this movement. No, you've got your life. So if you dedicate your life, that is all perfect. If you cannot dedicate your life, give some money. But if you are a poor man, you cannot give money, then give some intelligence. And if you are a fool, then give your words. Oh, Prabhupada. So, in any way, you can help this movement and do welfare activity for India and outside India. That is my request. I welcome you. And you study. We've got now enough books. There is no difficulty to study our books. We have given an English translation. Every gentleman knows English. And we are going to give in Hindi, Gujarati, and all other languages. Our friends have already begun translating. So there will be no scarcity of knowledge. Please come here, sit down at least once in a week, study all these books, try to understand the philosophy of life, and spread all over the world. That is the mission of Bharatavarsha. This Paropakar movement to do welfare to others, not like cats and dogs, simply bring money and enjoy the senses. This is not human life. Human life is for Paropakar. People are in ignorance, without knowledge of God, without the ideal of life. They are simply working like cats and dogs and hogs. They should be educated. Human life is a chance for getting such education. This is the center for education, educating the human society to become actually human being and make life successful. Thank you very much, Hare Krishna. The next day, January 24th, after staying in Juhu for almost 3 months, and finally getting the permission to build, Prabhupada left for Hong Kong, and afterwards, in quick succession, he visited Tokyo, Honolulu, Los Angeles, Mexico City, Caracas, Miami, Atlanta, Dallas, New York, London, and Tehran. In London, on March 11th, what? He covered all that? He reflected on his efforts in Bombay. Brahmananda, referring to one of Prabhupada's youthful exploits, said, "You must have been very brave." Yes, Prabhupada replied, "I am still brave." And the devotees laughed. Otherwise, how could I come alone to preach Krishna consciousness? I am still brave. Jai. Srila Prabhupada, the devotees exclaimed. Some astrologer told that this boy, for executing his purpose, will enter into the fire. He continued, "Yes, recently in our Bombay affair, it was fight with fire, is it not?" "Oh, yes," Brahmananda agreed. "And we have come out victorious." "Yes, all glories to Srila Prabhupada." "So many obstacles," Prabhupada said, "and still going on. Now the governor is concerned the governor of Maharashtra in Bombay. If he says yes, that is dangerous for him. If he says no, that is also dangerous. Before Prabhupada left Bombay, anticipating getting the permission to build, Mr. Sethi had raised the question of piling columns of reinforced concrete driven into the ground to support a building's foundation. Generally, to determine if you need piles or how strong the piles had to be, you hired a soil testing company to drill into the earth and see how far down you had to go to reach bedrock. And because the Juhu land was near the beach, it was expected the soil would be sandy with water underneath, and that we would need piles, which would be quite an expense, 2 lakhs rupees. This is sea area, Mr. Sethi had said, and every building has piling 30 to 35 feet below the ground. We must put piling in this land to build the temple. No, Prabhupada had insisted. We don't require piles. Just like that. After a few feet, the land is hard, so don't waste money. Still, Mr. Sethi had harbored some doubt, and he hadn't wanted to take chances. So he had brought a soil specialist who tested the topsoil and an engineer, and he had consulted some other experts. They all agreed, oh yes, you need piling. I felt torn. If Prabhupada said we didn't need piling, I thought that then if we didn't need piling, then we should just go ahead. But all the experts were saying we needed it. Prabhupada had left, and I was feeling pressure to begin the work because he had said, begin immediately no matter what. But the issue of the piling was not resolved. And finally, we decided to do a soil test, which was quite expensive, about 10,000 rupees. That would be the only way to know for sure. A company brought out a boring machine, and the machine started drilling, but after only 8 or 10 feet, the drill got stuck. It had hit bedrock. None of us had expected this so soon, except Prabhupada. The test confirmed that we didn't need piling. In fact, the layer of rock was so strong that it took the company days to get the drill out. We were all delighted, not only because Prabhupada's view was vindicated, but also because we would save a lot of money. Srila Prabhupada knows everything, Mr. Sethi said. From the beginning, he said we don't need piles. It was one of many incidents that increased his faith in Prabhupada. When he had been extremely ill, Prabhupada had visited him and, according to Mr. Sethi, had pleaded with Krishna to save him. Mr. Sethi had survived the illness and later remembered, Prabhupada was all-knowing, a person who can see things that are hidden from our eyes that we cannot see. You think, oh, he has relation with Krishna. What relation do we have with Krishna? From the beginning, I saw that Prabhupada Ji has so much intimate relation with Krishna that he came to visit and Krishna helped me, and now I am talking with you. Prabhupada was also extremely observant and acute. And he had known of another building that had been built even closer to the beach without piles. I don't know how he had been aware of that. I was not, but he said, I knew that if they didn't need piles, we wouldn't either. Another time, a man greeted Prabhupada walking between the temple and the beach. He'd never met Prabhupada, but Prabhupada addressed him by name, saying, "You are so and you do such and such work." The man was completely taken aback. Prabhupada seemed to know everything about him. But then Prabhupada told us that whenever he walked between the temple and the beach, he would see the same man on his balcony looking down, and on the balcony was a signboard with his name, advertising his services. Prabhupada said that the intelligent man noticed all his surroundings. He even noticed how many beams were in the ceiling over his head. Once, having been asked how many cars there were in Punjabi mail train, Prabhupada told us he had known exactly how many. On February 5, I wrote Prabhupada with some good news. We have received the commencement certificate for the towers, allowing us to come up to the plinth. Plinth?
From the foundation up to ground level.
Okay.
So that marks the different rooms or structure of the building.
That's the plinth. From the foundation up to the ground level, allowing us to come up to the plinth. We still have not received the sanction for the RCC, reinforced cement concrete plans, and the civil aviation certificate. Mr. Sethi estimates that the RCC plans will be ready in 3 weeks, and that after Saurabh Prabhu's approval, they can be submitted to the municipality for their approval. Paragraph. Another issue we faced was the setback land. The municipality wanted to widen the Juhu Tara Road, which ran in front of the Hare Krishna land, and so we had to cede them some of our property, the setback land running along the road. I thought they already did that. Quote, the municipal officers have come and demarcated the setback land, I wrote Prabhupada. Presently, our architect is preparing 5 drawings of the property according to the new setback line, and upon their calculating exactly how many feet we have been taken in the setback, the corporation will issue us a certificate giving us that area in FSI, floor space index, which determined how much floor space we were allowed in our new proposals. Then, only after receiving that certificate from the municipality, we will actually surrender the land and put up the wall. Very complicated. We had worked hard to get the permission to build, but Indian permits often include many conditions and were not valid until all the stipulations were met. One of the conditions in ours was that we had to have an internal access road of a certain width. And it just so happened that right where the access road was supposed to go, there were some palm trees. When Srila Prabhupada had returned to Juhu from his tour the year before, he had noticed that 1 or 2 of the trees had been cut down, and he was very concerned, even upset. Why did you cut down the trees? He had asked. I had told him that they had been in the way of the road and that we had to cut them down to get the permission for the temple, which I had thought justified what we had done. No, he had said, you go to the municipality and tell them it's against our religion to cut down trees. Prabhupada had told us what to do, so we'd done it. But the municipal officers had objected. No, on March 16th, when he returned from his world tour, Wow, March 16th. He left the 26th. Phew. Stopping for 3 days in Juhu on his way to Gora Purnim festival in Mayapur, practically the first thing he said was, I was just in Tehran and I've seen they have trees in the middle of the roads. The government allows it. So we can have trees in the middle of our road. On Prabhupada's order, we held our ground with the municipality, and they ultimately gave us the permission to keep the one remaining tree. And even today, that tree, which Prabhupada protected, is still standing in the middle of the road. Later, I reflected that Prabhupada had so much concern and care, even love for a tree, that how much care and love must he have had for each of us, his followers. And it was entirely due to his care and mercy and protection that we were able to stand in Krishna consciousness no matter what. In a later similar incident, when the devotees had to remove another tree to facilitate the construction, Prabhupada would not allow it to be killed. 25 or 30 men had to uproot the tree and using big cranes relocated to another part of the property. And they didn't follow that principle in Mayapur. And it caused a big uproar. And Bhavananda was dismissive. Around that time, Hansaduta came to Juhu to meet Prabhupada. He had been having difficulties with the other leaders of the ISKCON Hyderabad Farm Project, and he wanted to share his frustrations with Prabhupada, who listened patiently and with sympathy. I was impressed not only by how kind and compassionate Prabhupada was, but also by how much time he had to spend with us to smooth our rough relationships and heal our hurt hearts. Hansadupan explained his strategy for the farm's cows. The devotees would create such a superior breed which would produce such large quantities of milk that they would have more than enough milk for their own needs and would be able to sell the surplus for a good profit. This way, he reasoned, people would see that keeping cows was profitable and wouldn't kill them. Prabhupada responded, this is not the idea, to keep cows and get milk and produce yogurt and cheese and ghee, and by selling them to become fat, rich capitalists. The idea is to please Krishna. That is bhakti. In the Bhagavad Gita 18:44, Krishna says, Krishi Goraksha, agriculture and cow protection. We protect the cows because Krishna wants it, for Krishna's pleasure. Whether we make money or not, even if we lose money, we will still protect the cows and depend on Krishna. Our interest is to please Krishna. That is bhakti. Many different devotees came to serve at Hare Krishna land during this period. And though some had personal problems that came with them, Srila Prabhupada showed his care for them all. One of the devotees was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And I informed Prabhupada of her extreme behavior and asked him what to do, especially because her father had proposed to send her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. I know her, Prabhupada replied. She is a devotee. The mind is also part of the body, just like any other part. Just as one's arm or leg may be broken, but one's infirmity doesn't affect one's position as a devotee. So one's mind may be, quote, broken, but one's mental illness does not affect one's spiritual position as a devotee. And just as one's arm or leg can be mended by medical treatment, so one's mind can also be treated. In conclusion, Prabhupada approved of her undergoing treatment in a psychiatric hospital. Soon thereafter, when the devotee was in Ahmedabad, Prabhupada wrote her, referring to her illness. Anyway, we have to depend upon Krishna in all circumstances. As long as the body is there, there will be different degrees of health and unhealth. We have to tolerate these things, just as we have to tolerate the seasonal changes of sometimes hot, sometimes cold. You are a devotee, and so Krishna will protect you. Always think that Krishna is with you. He is present in his name, so you're always associating with him. When Prabhupada left from Mayapur, devotees followed him to the airport. Guru Garanga, who, with a small group from Switzerland, had stopped in Bombay en route to Mayapur, happened to be on Prabhupada's flight and ended up with him, his secretary, and just a couple of others in the waiting room. I was chanting my japa, pacing back and forth, Guru Garanga remembered, and as I turned, I saw that Prabhupada was calling me over. It was like in the movies. I had to look in both directions to see who he was addressing because I couldn't believe he would be calling me. Prabhupada gestured for me to come over, and then he tapped the seat right next to him for me to sit down. So, how is the governor of Geneva? He asked. Is he still worried about the Swiss economy if everyone joins our movement? I suddenly realized that Srila Prabhupada knew who I was. When we were in his presence, we sometimes wondered, does Prabhupada really know who I am? From that experience, I learned that Prabhupada not only remembered me, but also remembered the service I had done for him and everything that had been discussed. He could pick up from exactly where we had left off, the same conversation, and knew who was doing what for him. That gave me an enormous amount of inspiration that no service was unrecognized by Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was concerned that his foreign disciples were not allowed to enter into some Hindu temples, notably Jagannath Temple in Puri. April 74, Shamsundar Brahmachari, a godbrother of Prabhupada's, connected with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's Gaudiya mission in Puri, invited Prabhupada to visit Jagannath Temple, but Prabhupada replied, I have not visited Jagannath Puri because my men are not allowed to see the deity. When you arrange that we can visit the temple with my disciples, then I can come immediately. It is very regrettable that these American and European boys who are purely Vaishnav and who follow the principles are not allowed by the rascals to enter the temple. As stated in the Padma Purana, Arche Vishnu Shila Dir Guru Shu Naramatir Vaishnave Jati Bodhir. I do not know what makes the management take this attitude. If you can remove the restriction, you will do a great service to the Gaudiya Vaishnava community. According to Shastra, anyone who wears tilak and sikha and kunti over and above Vaishnava dress must be accepted, especially while chanting Hare Krishna mantra with bead bags. Kindly convince them and induce them to allow these Vaishnavas to enter the Jagannath temple. Later, Srila Prabhupada gave the same argument to Swami Chinmayananda, who wrote a letter certifying that ISKCON devotees were genuine Vaishnavas with all the symptoms and should be allowed in all Hindu temples. After seeing Chinmayananda's certificate, Prabhupada commented, he has done some service, and he asked me to present Chinmayananda a copy of 7th chapter of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila entitled Lord Chaitanya in 5 Features, which describes Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's defeat of the Mayavad sannyasis in Varanasi and their subsequent conversation with Vaishnavism. One copy of our book, Lord Chaitanya and the 5 Features, should be handed over to Swami Chinmayananda as our humble presentation. He wrote me, if somebody or yourself sees him personally, gives him thanks for his letter recommending our admission in the temples, and presents this book to him, that will be nice. As far as possible, all big Mayavadi sannyasis should be presented with this book. Whew, lion. That month, Gopal Krishna became the GBC for India. He landed in Bombay, but proceeded to Mayapur, where Prabhupada told him, your first task is to complete the Bombay building in 6 months. He attended the opening of the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan and then came to Juhu. But before he arrived, Prabhupada prepared me. To impress me with Gopal's competence and stature, he told me that Gopal had his own office in a major company and his own car. I was surprised to hear Prabhupada speak about Gopal Krishna in such terms. Did he think that in my association with big men in Bombay, I had developed that standard for assessing a devotee? I hadn't thought so, but I was convinced that he knew me better than I knew myself, so his words made me look into my heart. I was thinking of making you the GBC for India, Prabhupada told me, but then I considered that your service to the temple president of Bombay was more important. I knew I wasn't qualified to be GBC for India, but I appreciated Prabhupada's kindness in speaking to me in that way. In time, I noticed Prabhupada gave Gopal a lot more freedom than he had given Gopal's predecessors. I figured that either Prabhupada had decided within himself to withdraw a little from the management, or he felt that Gopal was able to function more on his own than the others. In any case, Prabhupada was leaving to Gopal matters in which he previously would have become more directly involved. I felt relieved that Gopal was carrying some of the burden of Prabhupada's management responsibilities. When the Krishna Balaram temple opened in Vrindavan, Prabhupada sent Saurabh to take charge of the construction in Juhu, which was accelerating. Although Saurabh expressed a desire to remain in Vrindavan and manage, Prabhupada wanted him to come to Bombay. Saurabh set up his construction office in our flat on the ground floor of the D block, which we had gotten in exchange for Prabhupada's upstairs flat in the same building, after we had constructed an entire floor for him on the F block. Nistrigunya became his site supervisor, Ekanath his treasurer. Although Saurabh did the main design for the complex, we needed a local architect to submit the plans and get them passed. We decided on Prem Nath, who was dynamic and modern and had done some high-profile projects. Saurabh sent the proposed design for the temple complex to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada approved it. Early one morning, Saurabh invited Jagat Purush to his office to see the design, which he had just received back. Murti Das, who served in the construction office, was also there. Jagat Purush studied the plan, noting that Prabhupada had signed it. "Where's the theater?" he asked. He hadn't been involved in any of the planning discussion, so he hadn't really considered whether there would be a theater or not, but it suddenly dawned on him that there should be. "There's no theater," he was told. "That's not part of the plan." "Why not? Don't we need one for cultural performances?" This is a celebrated event. "It was never really considered, and now it's too late. Srila Prabhupada has already signed off. But I think it's important. There should be a theater." Saurabh Murti agreed, but insisted that it was too late. All the architecture had been carefully planned out, and there was no space for it. Then Jagat Purush pointed to the design and said, "Why not just take this and move it to this side and put this up here and move this over there and put the theater here?" They examined the design, looked at each other, and looked at the design again, and then looked at him, and together said, "That might be possible." So they redrew the design to accommodate a theater and sent the new design to Prabhupada, and he approved it. As Jagat Purush later recalled, "It was an exciting moment for me because I felt like I was being Krishna's instrument. I had no architectural background, but I was just moved, I believe, by the super soul, and they saw that it was possible, and that's how the theater became a part of the design. And it became a major part of the Juhu project. That's how I heard of Jagat Purush's name in relation to the theater. I continued to inform Prabhupada of our progress on May 19. I wrote him, "Regarding construction, the excavation for the 2 towers has been completed, and today at the office of Prem Nath, the architect, we will finalize the tenders." Drawings?
Tenders are proposals.
proposals. Okay. After careful inquiry about what sort of contractors to use for this building, we came to the conclusion that labor contract is the best. In Bombay, there's great difficulty with labor because many are leaving for neighboring countries where they are offered very high rates. Therefore, to take the responsibility ourselves for labor will be very troublesome. Also, today, at the meeting with Premnath, we will discuss the master plan and all other programs we are planning for Hare Krishna land in the future. In stock, we have 2,000 bags of cement and 10 tons of steel, sufficient to lay the foundation of the 2 towers. We're trying to complete the foundation up to the plinth level before the heavy rainfall. We will keep close contact with you regarding the progress of the construction. Then, unexpectedly, we got a notice from the municipality dated May 17th, addressed to Prabhupada, stating the construction was being unlawfully carried out under your direction. And concluding, now I do hereby give you notice that if, under the expiration of 24 hours from the service hereof, upon you, it is found that the erection of the said building/execution of the said work is still being carried out on under your direction/by you, I shall, pursuant to section 354A of the said act, and in exercise of the powers conferred on me, as aforesaid, direct that you be removed from the said premises by a police officer. Addressed to Prabhupada. Both the order to stop the work and the aggressive tone and threats were shocking. We investigated why the permission had been revoked and discovered that the police commissioner had issued instructions to the municipality that the permission should be canceled on account of ISKCON's being a threat to the national security. Although the police were not directly concerned with the building of the guest house, their NOC was required only for the temple. The police commissioner had written a letter to the municipal corporation stating that the whole project should be stopped. We were trying to assess who was the enemy and what was their strength. We concluded that actually we had a stronger standing with the municipality than with the police, even though Matre was opposing us at every step. There was a consensus among the officers in the municipality that he was just harassing us. At first, they believed him because they didn't know us. But as they came to know us better, they realized that we were good and genuine and that Matre was just playing his usual tricks. The municipal officers were not against us, but they themselves were subject to harassment by Matre. So they couldn't go out of their way to help us, though within themselves they may have been sympathetic, and they wanted everything they wanted everything they did for us to be approved by the commissioner. The plans for the guest house had been sanctioned by the municipal commissioner, but again the construction was stopped by Matre through the police department, ultimately, as we later discovered, through the Home Secretary of the government of Maharashtra. So Matre was doing his best to stop us, and we wondered two things. Why was he so determined to oppose us? And how could a small politician like him have so much influence that he could stop our progress, though we ourselves were working through many channels with much influence? After Matre got our permission revoked, I asked Prabhupada why the man was opposing us so staunchly, and he answered that because Matre had been defeated when he had wanted to get the land, and he had been opposing us then, And in the end, he had gotten the land. In the end, we had gotten the land. He bore a deep grudge against us and was always remembering his defeat and trying to take revenge. Break. New allies. Gopal Krishna was expert at political and diplomatic dealings, and I was impressed with how he systematically pursued the matter of the permission from one politician to another, one officer to another, and back again. Quote, the president of the ruling Maharashtra Congress Party, P.K. Sawant, who had been caretaker chief minister of Maharashtra for some time, was quite pious and quite nice, he later recalled. And V.S. Page, the speaker of the Legislative Council, the upper house in the Maharashtra legislature, was also pious and a Sanskrit scholar. So practically every day, we would go to these politicians and tell them we were not getting the NOC. We would go to the police commissioner and he would say, I have no objection, go to the municipal commissioner. We would go to the municipal commissioner and he would say, I have no problem, go to that man. So we were going all day, from morning to night, from A to B, B to C, C to D. Because I knew most of the important people in Bombay, I was able to inform Gopal Krishna about them, and we went around together, meeting with the people we thought could help, especially with the permission for the temple. People I knew or who knew people I knew. I would introduce him, and in most cases, especially in dealing with the politicians, he would speak more than I would, explaining our situation and trying to enlist their help. We were afraid to approach the chief minister, S.B. Chavan, though, because he was the highest authority and we didn't know about him, how he would respond. One day, we met a newspaper reporter who had interviewed Chavan in some other connection, and he had mentioned us to him. Matre was getting bad articles about us published in the newspapers, so the reporter had asked the chief minister what he thought of the devotees. Although we didn't know the chief minister, he had said, I think they're very good people. I don't believe any of the bad things being published about them in the press. Ooh, feeling encouraged. We went to Sachi Valia to meet the chief minister's personal secretary to try to get an appointment. When we were waiting in the outer room, Gopal Krishna got the idea to just go into the chief minister's office. Usually the doors were guarded, but somehow there was no one around, and he said, let's go in. Usually when we entered an important person's chamber without permission, the person would press a button and call for a secretary to escort us out, or sometimes just shout, get out. So we weren't sure what to expect. But when we opened the door and entered, Chavan stood up and received us as holy men with honor and respect. He offered us seats and asked how he could serve us. When we explained our predicament, he said, I will help you. I will solve the problem. Don't worry. The Indian government has a two-tier system. There are the ministers, who are political figures, and the secretaries, who are administrative figures, who remain in position regardless of any change of ministers. For every minister, there is a corresponding secretary, the administrator in charge of that department. The Home Department, which is considered the most important and which includes the police, is handled on the state level by the chief minister. Since he deals with both general administration and home affairs, he has both the chief secretary and the home secretary directly under him. In the central government, although there is a home minister as well as a prime minister, at times the prime minister him or herself takes up the home portfolio because it includes internal security and is so important. On the state level, there is no home minister, so there is a home secretary. So, the most powerful position in the state is the chief minister, and beneath that is the chief secretary, and then the home secretary. It turned out that Mr. Matre had been meeting with the home secretary and feeding him false stories about us, and the police commissioner was under the home secretary, which is why he had kept refusing the NOC. Chaban, who was impartial, could see that we were being harassed. He called for the urban affairs minister, who oversaw the municipality, and for the home secretary, who oversaw the police, and addressed them in Hindi. Who is actually at fault, he asked. Are they the guilty ones, Chavan asked, or are you? It turned out that the home secretary, though in a high echelon, being the top administrative figure in the home department, was close to Matre, and Matre had been systematically brainwashing him against ISKCON. The home secretary didn't know us personally, but considered that he was a close friend of Matre's. I doubted he had been very pious or religious to begin with. When Matre had kept impressing upon him how bad we were, he had believed him and just regurgitated the bad things he'd been fed. All along, it had been he who had been stopping the permission from the police. The governor was actually more of a figurehead. The powerful person was the chief minister. Had the difficulty been only the police department, the governor of Maharashtra might have been able to do something. But because the opposition was coming from the home secretary, the highest authority other than the chief minister himself, practically nothing could be done. And nothing had been done until the chief minister himself took personal interest. Chavan put his foot down and stopped the whole thing. And the urban affairs minister and the home secretary issued instructions that the permission for the guest house should be reinstated and the NOC for the temple should be granted. Gopal Krishna ki jai. On May 26, 4 days after our meeting with Chavan, Gopal Krishna wrote Prabhupada about what had transpired. Prabhupada replied, "It is a great credit that you have met with the chief minister, and now he will give us all help. Why did you not apply immediately for the NOC? You should do it immediately if you have not done so already." The next day, I met the acting municipal commissioner of Bombay. And the day after that, upon his request, I submitted a letter to him summarizing our situation and the history of Matre's harassment, see Appendix B. We also, on Chaban's request, gave him a letter describing our mission and the history of our difficulties and officially applying for the NOC from the police, see Appendix C. The attitude of the government offices throughout the entire city changed overnight. Word quickly spread that the chief minister liked us and wasn't tolerating any more nonsense. Up until then, no had been helping us. But when they heard that we had chief minister's support, people became friendly, cordial, and cooperative. And wherever we went, without difficulty, we got whatever was due. On June 13, the legal department of the municipality informed us that the earlier notice, dated May 17, had been withdrawn and that we could proceed with the construction, quote, as per the plans already approved. We were jubilant. It was a huge defeat for Matre. Not only was his revoking of our permission overturned, but we were poised to get the full plans passed, including for the temple. On July 3, I phoned Prabhupada in the US to inform him of the developments, that we had gotten the NOC, and he spoke of it on his walk the next day. Prabhupada, we have got the no objection certificate tomorrow. Really? For the temple or the Prabhupada temple, Bombay, tomorrow? Really? No, really, that's with an exclamation point. The police commissioner has sanctioned. The chief minister has sanctioned. He is a very nice man. Tamal Krishna. Nayak? No, not Nayak. Nayak was a rogue. A new one? Yes, Chavan. Wait a minute. Nayak was the chief minister?
Before that.
The one that died?
No, that was Nair. The chief minister.
Oh, Nayak and Nair. Okay. He was a rogue. A new one. Yes, Chavan. Tamal Krishna. So now we can build 2 towers in a temple. Prabhupada, now bring money. Quote, unquote. Tamal Krishna, Srila Prabhupada, what is the plan? To send money or books? Prabhupada, money. Later the same morning, Prabhupada wrote me, I have received your report via telephone, and it is very good news that you have received NOC for the construction of the temple. So, you begin the work, and money will come to you by the grace of God. Don't worry, just finish the buildings as soon as possible, and somehow or other, money will come. In Bombay, you collect as much as you can, and the balance money will be sent, rest assured. I am instructing Rameswar to send Guru Kripa's collection to Bombay. So, you just finish all the buildings as soon as possible. You must also keep proper account that a single farthing should be wasted. I will see the accounts personally when I return to Bombay. Those words, when I return to Bombay, were music to my ears. Guru Kripa. Oh, Prabhupada swung right into action. On the same day, he wrote Guru Kripa, I may inform you that we received the permission for constructing our Juhu temple. I want that your collection should be sent there so that the buildings may be completed as soon as possible. And to Rameswar, I may inform you that in Bombay they have received the sanction for constructing the temple in Juhu. Until further order, whatever money you collect should be sent to Bombay. You should print books as far as possible, and whatever money you collect should be sent to Bombay. Guru Kripa has informed by telephone that he is sending you almost $75,000. This should be sent to Bombay. A few days later, he wrote to Governor Reddy, so far as our Bombay temple is concerned, I received one telegram from my secretary stating NOC for temple obtained. It is understood that the present chief minister, Sri S.B. Chavan, is a kind gentleman who is religiously disposed, and he has kindly given the order of NOC. Gopal Krishna, the magician. He's been so good at that. So good. I mean, it's not easy, but he's really good at it. Wherever he goes, the gift that Krishna has given him. And he uses it. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. There's more problems coming up, guaranteed. What a story, huh? The Juhu story. Just because of enmity that he wanted, he was ready to torture the devotees.